Hello, BookTube, and we're back with another edition of Desert Island Books, and I have Roy from Roy Reads Anything.
Hi.
Welcome to be a castaway. Or, welcome to be a castaway. No, that doesn't sound right. You're going to be a castaway, right?
Okay, yeah, I get it. Yeah, it
So,
sounds like a bad thing, doesn't it?
yeah, but you get all this time to read
Ah, yeah,
and
but
lay
only
in the
eight
sun.
books.
Yeah,
Mm, it could be worse. It could be worse.
yeah. So there's a few people here already. So let's start off with telling us something about yourself and then your channel.
Okay, well, I live in England. Live in the northwest of England. Quite the nearest city is Liverpool, but we live in a small town in the countryside, basically. I retired from work a couple of years ago, and I I'm married to Jenni, who's sometimes on the channel. She's not in the room at the moment, unfortunately, and started the booktube stuff probably 3 or 4 years ago. I haven't really kept count. I think I've done about 500 videos, and it's an eclectic channel where I basically talk about all sorts of things, so I don't really focus on one genre or whatever. It might be classics, it might be pulp, I might be doing an event, I might have read a romance novel, or one thing I do is probably quite a lot of Victorian and Edwardian stuff and looking at old magazines and that sort of thing. So I'm a bit multimedia.
Did you start off or at some point buy like a 3 foot shelf or some just of miscellaneous books and you were
I
just going to read
did,
through it?
yeah, that was the whole starting point. So one day I was looking on Facebook and somebody I know on there had said, "Oh, look at this, isn't it crazy? People buy books just for decoration." Which of course they do. I mean, I didn't know it was like a big thing, but people buy like, "Oh, just have 100 penguin books or a bunch of old hardbacks with cool looking spines or whatever." Or just like random ones, I want like a yard of books. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to buy these books that are sort of like been defined as not even worth reading, buy them and actually read them. So I did that. I got a set of books, and it was a mixture of non-fiction, fiction, and some of them were really interesting, and some of them were, old textbooks and stuff like that are
Yeah.
pretty awful. But there was some interesting stuff in there. So I just thought, well, how am I going to talk about this? Because I don't really just want to sort of do it in my own room and then think, that was interesting. And then I sort of looked into the whole YouTube thing and found there was a thing called BookTube, and probably went through the same things lots of people do of like, see, so there's BookTube, but it looks like this, it looks like these kind of people in these kind of settings with 50,000 followers. So well, I'm never going to do that. And then think, oh, hang on, but look, there's this and there's this, and there's people like yourself and Criminally, and thinking, well, they're in my kind of wheelhouse, really, and eventually sort of taking the plunge. Um, and then after a while, I'd done the yard of books and started doing other things, getting involved in booktube stuff like events and read-alongs, and sort of drank the Kool-Aid, and here I still am.
Yeah. And Jenny, hopefully she'll join us at some point in the background.
It's possible. I think you might be going to bed actually.
Uh, yeah.
We are very, very old. But yeah,
Uh,
that became a feature of the channel because I used to go upstairs into a completely different room and then I'd come down and I made a video. And then I started doing them down here, and Jenni would be around, and sometimes she'd just laugh at something I said, and that evolved into throwing in comments, and then sometimes we've made videos more together.
yeah.
Or she'll be sort of picking me up on something, or there's like banter and badinage. Those are the
It really
videos
worked.
people like best. I've become just like the straight man on
Yeah.
my own channel.
There's a few people here. Joseph is here, and Gavin.
Oh, hi, Gavin.
Jenny's here.
That Jenny. Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, that Jenny. Yeah, the other Jenny in Roy's life. Oh,
Mine's
better
got
not
an
say
E,
that too
so.
loud. Gavin is here. Hello, and
Gavin.
says Roy, you're doing a live stream.
Yeah, I know. I never do them actually. I hired an actor.
Yeah, it's actually Jenny in disguise. Maria's here. Summer, and you and Jenny's banter in the videos are wonderful. Yeah, they are. It has worked out really well. Rather than me having dogs barking over my shoulder in the next house.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a feedback that we have going here a little bit, but hopefully it's not too bad. I can get through it. Hopefully it's not too bad on people watching. So, but you're as old as you behave. Okay.
Well, that's like about
Or
15 then.
yeah, or we could do as Groucho Marx says, but that probably wouldn't fly
No,
on
no, no,
anymore.
no, no.
Yeah,
Edit that bit out. Oh, we
yeah,
can't.
yeah. I'll just mention it, but I won't say what it is. People can look it up if they want to. Winter Lindy, hello. So yeah, we got quite a good crowd here so far. So it's got a stadium effect. So it's kind of epic. Yeah. Every Desert Island Books is epic, though, isn't it?
Mm.
Oh, Sean is sounding like the voice of God. We have. I know the quote. Yeah. So that's why we don't need to say it. For those who know it, get it, and those who don't need to get it.
You had to be there.
Yeah.
I'm going to try switching to headphones in case it deals with the.
Yeah, it might.
thing.
Yeah. And yeah, no, I could still hear myself a little bit
Oh,
for
right.
some strange reason.
So
Yeah.
I thought it might be my speaker and microphone.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is, but it's not too bad. You sound like the all-knowing Oz. Yeah, pay no mind to the man behind the curtain. So yeah, you might as well take it off because
Well, yeah, if it's not making any difference.
yeah. So I guess we could jump right into the books now. I guess we've done enough little banter. Let's get down to business.
Okay, so this is like Desert Island Discs, but with books, yeah. So,
Yeah, they stole my idea.
so if I could only take a certain number of books, these would be the ones, and that's all
Yeah.
I've got to read forever. And you can't have a luxury as being like a perpetual book delivery machine. Or
No,
something.
no. But you will have a luxury item. But again, I never know what the luxury item is until it happens, or until I'm told.
Right. Well, it's been really interesting doing this actually, and because it's not quite the same as your top 10 like favorite books. Even I don't think it's
No,
more sort
yeah.
of books that you'd want to revisit.
Yeah.
Perhaps, or could be, I suppose, books that you have always wanted to read. I'm starting off with something called Tarzan Alive by Philip Jose Farmer. Oh, we got a visual echo now.
Yes.
So this is a biography of Tarzan written as if he's a real person.
The definitive biography.
Yeah, it's, yeah. The true and definitive biography.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's quite a lot of books like that for various characters, and I always sort of enjoy them. But there's lots of great stuff about this. I read it when I was a teenager, and I've reread it several times. And as well as being like figuring out ways that the Tarzan of the Apes stories could somehow be real, sort of dialing down a few bits or things that were just repetitious or whatever, and saying, "Oh, that was like a you know, made up by Edgar Rice Burroughs, his biographer." And then dealing ingeniously with some anomalies and fact and errors and impossibilities in the stories. Things like his son couldn't possibly be the age it says and stuff like that. As well as doing that, it also has the conceit that loads of fictional characters, particularly sort of pulp heroes and detectives and adventure heroes, are all related to each other. And there's a kind of a science fiction explanation for this, relating to a meteorite that fell in England in 1700 sometime, near to a coach carrying several characters from who were like ancestors of this sort of family tree of heroes and villains. So it just turns into this whole mad thing. So to me, this is like a distillation of like almost of all of fiction, but certainly all of pulp fiction. You know, it creates a sort of nexus where all these things fit together, and it's beautifully written, and it brings out the sort of mythical aspects of the Tarzan stories as well. So, and it's kind of got enthusiasm about it, plus survival skills. Who
Yeah.
could be better than Tarzan for wilderness survival information? I can't take like the Tarzan books because there's, I don't know, you know, dozens of them if you include ones written by later authors. So that's my first one.
Yeah, I picked this up because it's recently, but I haven't read it in a long time. But yeah, it's I just love the way Phil Jose Farmer's imagination just sort of runs wild at times and
Mm.
riot. You know, I was going to say riot, but it's wild and riot. And yeah, the what is it called? The Wold Cottage.
Wold
Uh,
Newton, yeah, that's
yeah,
the
Wold
Wold Newton is
Newton.
the
Yes,
place which
yeah,
is real in
yeah,
Yorkshire, where it's quite near you actually.
yeah, yeah. It's not that far. Yeah.
um, yeah, where this meteorite fell that sort of starts it all off.
But the thing is that, like, you know, Fu Manchu is part of this. James Bond, you know, is Sherlock Holmes, Moriarty, like they're all related. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's the diagram.
yeah, yeah. It's on the
He
end
did
paper
another
too.
one too about Doc Savage, and that elaborates the whole thing. And then there are writers who like write their stories within this framework and sort of take it and use it in various ways, or sort of find other connections and bring in other characters.
And I like too that he uh in Tarzan learns or the apes speak to him. But if I remember right, the apes aren't apes. They're like Australopithecine or something like that. There's some early hominids, you know, or early human or pre-human species that have, you know, lived on for a little while, and so he explains that away because apes can't talk.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
now these ones can. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's good
Another,
stuff. I'd recommend it to anybody
oh
really.
yeah, yeah. Another thing I wanted to say about the film Jose Farm, because you're doing, and we'll, I won't spoil any of the other upcoming books, but you are doing Finnegan's Wake
Hmm.
recently. Do you know the connection of Farmer and Finnegan's Wake?
Well, I know he was into James Joyce and all that stuff, and isn't one of his characters got a name that comes from the?
Uh, Most likely, there's some
Yeah.
other ones, but he wrote a book called uh, "Riders of the Purple Wage,"
Oh yeah, I've never read that one.
and that is a sort of takeoff of Finnegan's Wake, but
Oh really?
obviously with a pun on Riders of the Purple Sage.
So yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I
So
didn't get
yeah,
much
and
further than that, but we'll probably have to pick that up then as part of
yeah,
our
because I don't
Finnegan's Wake
remember it
project.
much because it's a long time ago that I read it, but I think it's just basically talking about dystopian type future where people are barely making living wage. Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. The work of prophecy. Oh, that's interesting. I know I mean, Farmer was obsessed with Tarzan and did explored him in lots of ways,
Yeah.
including his own fictional stories that include Tarzan type characters or sort of Tarzanic type of people. He did a short story where he wrote Tarzan, which obviously is written by Edgar Rice Burroughs in the style of William Burroughs. I think it's called The Jungle Rot Kid on the Nod.
And also too, he has John Clayton, which is Tarzan, hiring Sherlock Holmes to
Oh
do
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I forget the name title of that one, but it's a short novel. But yeah, he hires Sherlock Holmes, so he hires his cousin in a sense, like within
Yeah,
within the universe.
yeah. I didn't like that book actually. I thought it was too. I was really disappointed it wasn't serious. You know, it just seemed like it was satire all the way. That one.
Yeah, I don't remember. I picked up a copy of it, I think, a couple of years ago because I do want to do a more systematic read through of Farmer. Probably not chronologically, but probably starting with Riverworld. Gavin's been doing the Riverworld series,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah. They're good.
yeah, and I want to look at all the precursor ones that he wrote, where the ideas sort of came from, the magazine versions, and see how he evolved it into the epic that it was. And the strange thing is, I'm just thinking, Richard Burton is not the Wald family. I don't think, is he? He should
No, I
be.
don't think he is, but he's the river. He's a major character in the River World, isn't he?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I'm disappointed at that, especially because well, see, he was a real. See, maybe that's why, because there's not too many real characters in here, are there? Part of the
no,
world, I
no.
don't think.
It's more your sort of Mr. Darcy type people, isn't it?
Yeah,
Um, oh yeah.
but the thing is, like, I'd like to know how he brings in um, Fu Manchu, and I think he bring in Charlie Chan and Mr. Moto, or at least one of them. I think he brings in, and
Yeah, one of them at least.
I wonder how does he do that? Like, that's the one thing I want to explore more, because it's like he had such an imagination that is warped at times, but great.
Yeah, yeah. So part of the way it works is you can't just sort of make stuff up and let you know. You've got to sort of do some pseudo scholarship and create some kind of way that people could be related through
Yeah,
through names and brick things like that.
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how he does with Fu Manchu. Jenny was saying there nice muscle tone, so I'm not sure which one she was referring to, yours or mine.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's a funny looking calf muscle there on mine. That's a funny
Mm.
looking calf muscle.
Yeah, yeah. That is. I think that's Bern Hogarth. I think it's from the comics.
Uh, a jacket by Milton Glasser.
Oh, right.
Well, it says jacket by, so, but it doesn't say jacket art, because sometimes they've got the jacket art designer and then they got the artist. So I don't know which
Yeah,
one that is.
yeah, yeah.
Mick is here. Hello, Mick.
Oh, hey, Mick.
Oh, the fashion of ancient heroes. Yeah, loincloth. Uh, yeah, is that? Yeah, yeah. We wound up answering that for Jenny, the same author of Riverworld series, and Dave Briss. Sorry, I thought I had to sneeze, but it was a cough. Damn, I just decided on Tarzan Live for one of my books. Nothing wrong with doubles, Dave. I picked Lovecraft, same as Gavin. Maybe you guys can have a book club after swimming to each other's islands. Well, it's all one island. It's just it's a multi-dimensional island.
Okay, so it's more like Lost then.
Yeah, but you never see each other.
Oh,
You might
right,
get
okay.
echoes of them. You know.
That's more like BookTube then.
Yes.
Just the echoes.
So that's
Number
number
two?
one.
Hmm. Well, probably a choice maybe lots of other people will have, but The Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah.
Um, Again, I'm thinking of the rereading possibilities, you know? I mean, here you've got basically world building almost to a fault. Just reread it actually, and it's so geographical. You know, every sort of place has to be described to the point where you could almost recreate it if you needed to. You get to sort of, you know, where do the hills go? Where does the water come from? What are the trees like? He's telling you all this stuff. But I think for sort of immersion into something that wasn't a desert island, and also that has some resonance with the country I know, you know, because it is a sort of version of England, perhaps, or parts of Britain. Um, I think this would be really good to get lost in, and I know it's got rereading capability. So this is actually a one volume edition that came out in the 70s that I've always really liked. Although it doesn't have all of the appendices, so I wouldn't be able to sit there like learning Elvish because though they left those bits out. But yeah, Lord of the Rings. Give it a try if you've never read it.
I've That's the one thing I've not read it yet.
Mm.
I that's one. Well, there's a lot of fantasy that I haven't read. But yeah, that was Jenny's choice as well. That's just before we continue here a little bit. Yeah, Gareth is saying he picked Lord of the Rings as well, and Jenny says I love that book too. My favorite book to reread. It might be the most common book in the whole series. Yes, I think that and Shakespeare. I think the complete Shakespeare are running neck and neck, but I
Mm.
haven't kept the tally. But it's from memory. It seems to be that. And Dave is saying we can leave books for each other in the big knothole in the old tree. Mark's looking back. Yeah, near the uh, oh, what's the void or the hole that you get to the island, the interdimensional portal. It'll be
Okay,
near
yeah.
the interdimensional portal.
Well, it'd be pretty disappointing if it's always the same book.
Yeah, everybody puts it in. Yeah, I am not sure how much more I could say about, like, for me to
Yeah,
talk about this because
yeah.
I've done.
It should almost be. I mean, on the Desert Island Discs show, they used to let people choose a book, but they said apart from the Bible and Shakespeare, so it's like you were getting Shakespeare already.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I suppose loads of people would have said that. But I'd
yeah. So
almost put this
maybe
in
it's
that
like you could
category.
choose 8 books, but no longer Lord of the Rings or Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, Gareth is saying, leave me some biscuits too. I haven't read. Oh, well, okay. I was going to say, oh, another person that's never read Lord of the Rings, but no, since he was 14, 54 years ago. But yeah, I've yet to read it, so
Wow.
that's my big thing for it. And there's a few books that I have not read, and another one that people are shocked with, even though I know the story inside and out, basically. And I have not read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Mm.
Like, there's a few
No.
strange things there.
Yeah. I mean, I have. There's lots of books I haven't read. Anything they gave us to read at school, I've basically never read because the
Oh,
fact like Lord of the Flies, for instance,
so
just
yeah, you don't want to.
it was the way they used to do the testing when I was at school. It was easy to get top marks without actually reading the books, so I
Yeah,
just used to read what I wanted. um, But yeah, you know,
Jenny,
it's Lord of the Rings. I mean, there's the debate: should you read The Hobbit first? And
I did, which might have been the mistake
mm,
because I did read that a couple of years ago and I didn't really care for it. So that might have been the mistake because that's sort of temporarily put me off
right,
picking
yeah,
up
yeah.
Lord of the Rings. So I'll get to it, I think, at some point. But I like Jenny's quote: "You can take me freedom, but you can never take me Tolkien." Okay, that's my best bad Mel Gibson Scottish accent.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think that I'm Lord of the Rings out because I don't know what else to say about it myself other than yeah, I've not read it and that's it.
Well, the other thing that surprised me on this latest read through is there's quite a lot of horror in it, sort of scary stuff, you know,
Yeah.
and not just because if you've seen the film, like I've seen the film like many more times than I've read the book, um, but there's real sort of atmospheric, scary bits that are almost M.R. James like sometimes. So
Oh, okay.
that's a whole thread that he's kind of you don't really hear so much about.
Yeah, I like M.R. James. Definitely, I'm a
Mm,
big M.R.
yeah,
James fan. Mr. James.
yeah. I'm not taking them on. I'm going to be on my own. I'm not sitting there reading ghost stories.
Uh, let's see here. Yeah, Gavin was saying, or Gareth. They're so different that I don't think it matters if you read it or not. I guess that's the Hobbit and
Mm,
Lord of the Rings. And Summer says Hobbit was her favorite. I tried Lord of the Rings but couldn't get on with it. Maybe it's time to try again. Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's what I found is uh, books that you read at one point and you just, for some reason, it's not clicking. But then you pick it up
mm,
again
mm.
and sometimes it still doesn't. Or then maybe a third try, it actually works, because it just depends on the frame of mind you're in, I think, and it works.
Yeah, I think the first time I read it when I probably was quite young, but I think I thought everything that was mentioned you somehow had to take on board. So if he mentioned some mythical elf from 500 years ago, you realise after a while all of this is just background and atmosphere. You don't have to like
Mm.
know it. It's not actually part of the story. A lot of stuff's really just sort of well, you know, world building.
Yeah.
But reading it the first time, I thought, bloody hell, I've got these all these, you know, there's all these threads I've got to keep hold of. It's too much.
Mm.
Plus, then some of it seemed a bit babyish as well because it starts off in a very sort of homely level with the hobbits and stuff like that. Um, and I sort of thought I can't read a 1,000-page fairy story because
Well, that's
I'm a
that's what like I found the Hobbit was that I know it was written for kids, but it was sort of I found it written down to kids because he's always talking down to them, and that I didn't really care for, and I like I've read other children's books, like even new ones for me, like Paddington Bear, and I love it because the author's
mm,
not reading down to the reader. The author's not reading down. The author's not talking down to the reader. God, I'll figure out that some at some point.
no,
And
no,
Jenny
yeah, I
says
know what you
she
mean.
choked on her haggis. I
So yeah, I
didn't
think if
get.
you're looking about children's fantasy, I'd say Alan Garner is better. Um, those Welsh ones, can't remember what they're called now. They're good. um,
Yeah,
the
I'm not
Prida,
familiar with
Prida,
those.
well, it's not pronounced Prydain, but there's loads better children's fantasy than The Hobbit.
Hmm.
Susan Cooper.
Oh, I've heard of her. I've heard of her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's another good one.
I didn't get top marks, but I passed my English lit O levels without reading any of the books.
Excellent.
Well, I only remember liking one or two. Yeah, two, I guess it would be. Was Grapes of Wrath. Everybody else hated. and I loved Macbeth, and everybody else hated that.
Oh,
All
right.
the other ones they liked, I hated.
Yeah, I did quite like the Shakespeare. Um,
Immersive reading with Andy Serkis audio is a great way to read them.
good point. Yeah.
Thanks, Jenny. That sounds like a good idea. Somebody says, I tried to pay attention to the lyrics of millions of songs, and then I realized that they meant nothing. Andy Serkis, he sings all. Oh God, I don't know if I'd
Oh,
want to
yeah,
go
yeah.
through that.
That's the thing.
That could be difficult, or it could be good.
Hmm.
So, okay, let's leave Lord of the Rings behind.
Well, I thought it would be good to have some poetry, and rather than like a book, find a poetry book I know, I've actually bought this to actually have a really good poetry anthology. So this is the Blood Axe book of 20th century poetry. So Blood Axe are a poetry publisher. Why are they called Blood Axe?
Oh,
I don't know,
okay.
because it sounds like they should be publishing Conan the Barbarian. Um, but I've kind of gone for a pretty canonical choice, I suppose. You know, I'm sure this is a great collection. Um, but again, 20. I figure that yeah, I'm in the 21st century, but probably when it comes to culture and stuff, that 20th century is pretty much my century. So I just thought getting a really good anthology or a, a, a likely to be really good anthology to explore would be a good thing in this desert island situation.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that one before, so that's why I was curious to find out who's in it
Yeah,
and
well, it
what's in it.
starts off with Thomas Hardy. Don't always think of as a 20th century writer.
Which one, the Nightingale or
Um, so you start the very first poem is the Darkling Thrush.
the Darkling? That's the one. Yeah, Darkling Flash. Yeah,
Um, you got your W.B. Yeats, Edward Thomas, D.H. Lawrence, Siegfried Sassoon. So I think it's chronological.
hmm.
Um, Edwin Muir, T.S. Eliot, but only three. Ivor Gurney, who I don't know, Isaac Rosenberg, Hugh McDermid, Wilfred Owen, Charles Hamilton Sawley, Robert Graves, Austin Clarke. Uh, only men allowed to write poetry. What's going on? Stevie Smith, Patrick Kavanagh, Norman Cameron, William Empson, W.H. Auden, Louis MacNeice, John Hewitt, Robert Garriock, Norman McCaig, who I know well, R.S. Thomas, Henry Reed, Dylan Thomas, Alan Lewis, W.S. Graham, and on it goes. Oh yeah, Tom Gunn, he came to our school once. Ted Hughes, Geoffrey Hill, Sylvia Plath, Fleur Adcock. Well, I'm not reading them all out, but it
Yeah,
does look
yeah.
like could be criticised for being perhaps a little bit too male orientated. Then you come up to ending up with some Simon Armitage and some Don Patterson. So
Well, it looks like it's quite
yeah,
a
I reckon there'd be a lot in here,
yeah.
and I it just felt like a little bit more manageable than a sort of Oxford Book of English Verse or something like that.
Just curious, what's the Wilfred Owen poems in there, or is it just one?
Oh, there's a bunch. Um, 8. Anthem for Doomed Youth. I saw his round mouth crimson deep, and as it fell, Dolce et decorum est, insensibility, strange meeting, futility, the send-off, exposure. I think a lot of them are quite short
Yeah.
because all of those fit in between pages 98 and 104. So you get Yeah, so they pack them in. You know, it's
Yeah.
not like one poem per page. It's they kind of run onto each other.
I'm trying to think of the name of the one that I really like of his. Well, I like a lot of his, but it's basically the one about the soldier um, who kills himself, and then like he ends the poem with all these people who are praising these youngsters going off to war. Just think about what you're doing. And it's a really really powerful poem, and I was sort of hoping that would be in there, but I guess the dulce et whatever is will sort of take that place for it.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I've
But
not
yeah,
really
it's
read
interesting.
these since school.
I just never heard of it before. So there's yeah, as you say, they pack a lot in there. So it looks short, but there's a heck of a lot in there by the looks of it.
Yeah, I mean, as a poetry publisher, they're one I would sort of, you know, the quality threshold is high, sort of thing. I would probably buy a Blood Axe book.
But
um,
yeah, it's just where does that come from? I
it's
don't know.
just I don't
I've not
know.
heard of them.
Perhaps they thought, well, we might go. It's either going to be Viking sagas or poetry. Let's see which one works
Yeah.
most.
Do they have like a 19th century volume and with that
Oh,
as
in these
well?
collections. Well, good question. I think of them more as a modernish sort of publishing house. But yeah, don't know really.
Hmm. Well,
So
that's yeah.
yeah, and I
I was
suppose
curious.
also it's kind of without taking any history books, it's sort of a history of the, in a sense, of the 20th century, and that it's people's responses to things during that period.
Yeah, especially like I would say up to uh, the end of Second World War, but then after that, if they start having the beat poets, well, I guess that's still historical, but it's like they lose me. They just I'm
Mm.
lost at that point. That poetry just sort of escapes me.
Well, it seems to have escaped them as well, actually.
Well, then I might like them. I might like them as a
Yeah.
publisher.
Who could you call?
So if it's 27, so I'm assuming they're going right up until like the 1990s. So I assumed it would
Yeah,
be beat
yeah,
stuff in
yeah.
there.
No, I think the beats are a, a byway they have not explored.
And also, too, most of what you've mentioned there are British
Yeah,
poets
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Oh, hang on. Yes, it is it's an anthology of poetry from Britain and Ireland.
Ah, okay.
Which yeah, so they haven't put that in the title, but that's what it is. Um, a map of poetry from Britain and Ireland, which readers can follow. You will not get lost here, as in other anthologies, with their vast lists of poets summoned up to serve a critic's argument or to illustrate a journalistic overview. Instead, Edna Longley, the editor, shows you the key poets of the 20th century and through interlinking commentary, well, that's good, points
Oh,
up
that's
the
good.
connections between them as well as their relationship with the continuing poetic tradition of these islands. Oh,
Well, it'd be
I
hard
like
to
it even
make
better
the
now. Sounds like you could read it like a book. You know,
yeah.
start at the beginning. Normally I just dip into poetry books, but it sounds like a good one to follow consecutively.
And the thing is, like, of the criticism, you can't really make the criticism anymore. Why is it all male poets? Who's the editor? It's a woman
Yeah,
editor.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And certainly, why is there no beats? Because I mean, you know, obviously there were some British beats, but I think they would have been like followers, really.
Yeah, yeah. I
So yeah, that's
they would
part of
they,
my
they,
thing. I think is, you know, use the 8 books to have different dimensions of reading, and poetry is one of them.
yeah. Well, especially yeah. That I'm gonna actually look that up at some point, or at least put it on a list because I like the idea of the commentary connecting things.
Yeah, that
That's a
sounds
really
great,
neat
doesn't it?
idea. Uh, Mick is asking any mentions of the Mersey sound.
Good question.
Yeah,
Well, mention perhaps,
yeah.
but
I guess if there's an index,
was Paul? I mean, there aren't the names you'd expect of like the main Merseysound people. There might be some like Merseysound adjacent, Wirral Sound. Um,
and Gavin is
yeah,
saying,
I think
or
it was
Gareth. Why am I?
unfortunate if.
I'm calling Gavin Gareth and Gareth Gavin. Anyway, yeah, he was going to ask about Brian Patton if Brian Patton is in there.
No, I guess
See, I would think something like
I
this
would
to
have thought.
compile would be easy to do for getting up to like maybe the 60s ish,
Hmm.
and then after that, when you start getting in the last 20 or 30 years, how do you evaluate the quality of the poetry? Like, do you evaluate it on your personal aspect, or you can't really evaluate it on its impact because it hasn't had that time to impact,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And
yeah.
that would be really difficult to do. Like, it's easy
Right.
enough to do like World War I stuff because you can see the impact of all that, like of that poetry for generation and generation after that. But when there's something somebody's writing in the 1980s and 90s, yeah, it could be
Yeah,
popular. They could have won awards, but is it going to be remembered in 20, 30, 40, 50 years?
yeah. But then she'd be criticised if it finished in 1970 as well for
Exactly. Yeah.
different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess also if it's all of Britain and Ireland, she's got quite a lot of territory to cover, as well as the timeline. Um, which is good. It's obviously not neglecting Irish writers and Scottish writers and Welsh writers. So yeah, I still think it would be good. But then we'd probably all produce a different book, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
You know, to me, I think they're a bit of that those Mersey poets are kind of a. They did something distinctive in the way that the Beats did something distinctive from America, which was to get poetry into the sort of
Yeah.
popular vernacular, and I think that should be celebrated or at least acknowledged. But maybe she talks about the stuff she couldn't fit in. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing is too, they're old enough to actually, you can look back and see their effect. But how can you really look back on something that's only 10 or 20 years old and say, oh, this has really affected, poetry or literature or anything like that? You can't. You could say, well, it was a hit at the time, but
Mm.
after that, you don't know. It's up in the air.
No, I mean it's. I mean, I would trade you a couple of these later folks for some others easily,
Yeah.
but even though they've been poets laureate, so maybe they must
Yeah,
they
yeah,
must be good.
yeah, yeah. That's why I was saying, like, you may win awards or being a poet laureate, like what it's Carol Ann Duffy.
Mm,
I
yeah, she is in here.
Yeah, and I like her early poetry, but after a certain point, like after she became the poet laureate, like I don't like her stuff at all. Like it's just not at all. But her early stuff is interesting. But her latest, I guess, what he would say, like newer stuff, isn't so much. But see, that's a personal one for me. So if I was doing that, I would probably excerpt her from it, maybe completely, because her early poetry may not come up as to what I think other people. And then somebody else would say, "Oh, that's a travesty. She should be in there."
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Oh gosh, yeah, sure. Well, she's the one who's a professor of English, so
Yeah,
I bow to her wisdom in this. But no, it
yeah.
does look a pretty good collection, and
No,
given that it's a desert island, you can't take a library of poetry, so and just taking one, I couldn't think of a poet who I'd just want their work only. So I thought a bit of variety would be good.
I did. I took a collection of John Clare's poetry, the
Oh,
Oxford, world classics works or whatever it's called. So that was my choice. Was his, and then I'm pretty sure it was, or it was a runner up because it was going to be the Arthur Quiller Cooch's, you know, uh, Oxford Book of Verse, because I do love that, with all its faults, I love that one.
mm,
But yeah, and then but yeah, it's very male oriented, that one for sure. But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's of its time.
Well, that's right, yeah. And I guess I mean, you'll see, I've got an art book as well that we could say the same thing.
Yeah, but yeah,
And
though
obviously, it
that's a
would
good
be
art book.
possible to think, right, I'm gonna take a more recent book collection, whatever, that sort of has this kind of let's look at the history function, and one that focuses on things like decolonizing and rebalancing the genders and so on. And that would be fine, but I also feel like if I was just, if you were bundling me into the plane that's going to take me to the island and I was just going to the bookshop to grab my 8 books, there are things in what you could, there are things in the established canon that I just have never explored,
Yeah,
and that's what I felt drawn to. So what
yeah,
can you
no,
do? That's
yeah,
where I
yeah,
found
no, I
myself going emotionally.
yeah, and well, when we get to the art book, you've triggered something that I'll try to remember to say when we get to the art book, with that thing of that it's limited to its time period, and
Yeah.
I'll try to remember to mention that. So and unless that's next, and then I won't have to try to remember. I'm not sure if it's next.
Oh, it could be. Oh,
Okay, let's do it next then.
let's do that then. From poetry to art. So, for similar reasons, I've gone for the Gombrich story of art, which they've made it look like a tablet of stone being brought down from the mountain. It really, at least it looks authoritative. And again, this is another one I would take this to read, not having really read it yet. So I'm drawn to the idea of just taking a run through visual art and the movements and some of the major figures with a book which is of its time and limited in loads of ways, no doubt, but also is big and chunky, and has pictures in it, which is great.
Well, it's definitely a newer Fiden because it's got colored pictures.
Yeah, yeah. Apparently, that's part of the fix. The recent fixing up is making it into color plates. So I, I don't think they. Oh yeah, you get the occasional black and white shot of like a building or something, but I think
Yeah, I
the
think architecture works better in black and white, actually.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
But again, following a sort of through line of classical art, and there's lots of stuff I just don't know about how things fit together with the sort of, I was just looking, there's a section called The Age of Reason, for instance, and I just have never really made those connections, so I thought that would be a good little project to do. I'm
yeah,
sure, like a lot of these, if in the scenario of the desert island, a lot of this reading would make you really desperate to read more and to follow links and
yeah,
pathways and so on.
yeah.
Um,
That,
but
that that's what I always I always want a book that has a good bibliography in, but I also hate books that have a really good bibliography
Yeah.
at the same time. But that is a great one, and I know I'm sure because it has a time. I think he wrote it in the 50s.
Mm.
I think it was done in the 50s, or maybe or early 60s, but it's not much later than that, I don't think. And he was an American, but he lived most of his life, I think, in the UK.
Right.
And it was, I think, it was one of the first sort of comprehensive histories of art. That covers everything from right from the beginning of time, basically. Primitive, so-called primitive art, up until the 20th century. I think it deals with 20th century as well. And yeah, he's of the old school. It's sort of like, it's like if you just want art, like you got the Civilization by Clark,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
again old school type stuff. But it's still I think it's still valid. And like I say, it's almost like a historiographical, because you're getting a picture of what people thought of art at the time, so you can read it in that way. But also too, there's times, and I was gonna mention sort of film books. Like, I've got a few encyclopedias of the studios like Warner Brothers, and but they put out various editions. And somebody said to me, "Well, why do you want the old edition?" Because there's the new one with the new movies, and I'm going, I don't really care about the new movies.
Mm.
It's the older ones that I want, and I want more of the
More about
opinions
them.
of the
Yeah.
people of the time, of what they thought of it then. And Grombridge is a perfect example of that. From what I remember, it's a long time since I read it, and when I read it, I had the old Fiden, which all had black and white pictures in.
Right. 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 And I grew up looking at art books. You remember those Thames and Hudson ones with the
Oh yeah,
black
yeah,
spines? Um, but I would gravitate towards the more modern stuff then. So it would be interesting to explore like way further back. It's also a nice book as well. Physically, it's nice. It smells nice. It's probably big enough to do practical things with, like breaking coconuts open or something.
Well, it's
But
nice to know that it's still in print, but it looks like that's a new book. Like, so it's
yeah,
still in
yeah,
print.
yeah. It's let's
So,
see what's edition.
if it was so bad, for opinions and everything like that, I doubt it would still be in print. It's not outdated yet. For fully
First
outdated,
published 1950.
it is 50.
Um,
Okay.
Text looks like the last textual update was 1995. Um,
Yeah, he was
and
still
this
alive
is
then, I
actually
think.
came out last year.
Yeah, he was still alive. I think he lived. Um, I'm not sure when he died, but he did live up until I think in the 1990s anyway.
Wow. Yeah, looking forward to getting into this. I mean, in
Yeah,
real life, without the limitation of only having one book, I would read other stuff. So I've actually
yeah.
also got Katie Hessel's. I think it's called The History of Art Without Men, for instance. I think that would be an good counterpoint to this one, for sure. But if you're asking for the cut to take, I'm going old school.
Yeah. Well, there was a book that I used in high school when I took an art class, and it was called The History of Art. I can't remember. It was a great big hardcover affair, and it was, I think the author was female, but it was something like his. But it's like, and then I discovered this one, and then I read that one. And I liked this one better. Then I can't remember the name of it. It's just, I think it's just called The History of Art, and it was in the Canadian school system anyway. I'd probably be able to find it if I'd actually thought of looking for it. But it's good too. It's like another uh, large book, and it was hardcover, so you'd even be able to crack more coconuts with that one, or with the other one.
Yeah, right. And exercise too.
Yeah. So you say that your interest in art was all more modern stuff. So have you ever actually gone back to look at older art or architecture
Oh
or
yeah, yeah,
sculpture?
absolutely. Yes, but not in a methodical way, I suppose. And I've probably seen a lot more contemporary art than more sort of historical things. Um, it's one of those things where it works better for me if somebody explains it.
Uh,
So if the, you know if captions, museum captions and stuff like that, I think are really important to sort of give context and know what it is you're looking at and why.
yeah,
Um,
you mentioned the Thames and Hudson ones, the slim ones. Pelican or Penguin put out a really nice series of art books, and I they were used in a lot of my university classes for like the art and architecture of ancient Egypt, for Rome and Greece. Some of them are really dense reading, but they are really good as well if you're interested in ancient art. They did an
okay.
Oriental art one, which I've not read, but I've read the ancient, more Mediterranean ancient world ones, and they're marvelous. And I had a chance of buying a whole set of those one time,
Oh,
and they were only a couple pounds each. But I'm going,
oh no.
where am I going to put that? And I didn't, and I
Mm,
kicked myself for doing it. But then I'd be now looking at it and going, okay, I got to downsize.
well, yeah,
I would have to
space,
get rid
isn't
of them
it?
anyway. So.
Yeah, there's lots of things I think that about.
Yeah, you must be a bit tight for space there too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, I just keep things coming and going really.
yeah,
So that's all I can do is sort of keep reevaluating and try to get things to go out as much as things come in.
yeah. That's what I got to start doing, and that's difficult. That's a difficult thing to do.
Mm,
But
mm.
okay, where do we? That was fourth. Was that the fourth book, or we half done?
Four, yeah, that's four. Yeah. So
Mark's
next
here.
one's a lot more kind of indulgent, and back to the sort of I can reread these endlessly and it's immersion in a world and so on. But it's also kind of comforting as well. So this is a complete Sherlock Holmes collection. So it's all of Arthur Conan Doyle's Holmes stories, the four novels, and all the short stories in one handy giant chunk that's also quite nice. Read them before, you know, it they don't to me they don't really work like whodunits in the sense of oh
No.
well no point reading that again because we know who did the crime. You know, it's much more about the atmosphere and the characters and stuff like that really. And I've really enjoyed the Holmes event in February this year and last year. And you know, there's other stuff that isn't in here, pastiches and movies and things like that. But as with a lot of things, you can't beat going back to the source, and I just know I'd be able to enjoy this endlessly.
And like, do you have any? Yeah, if you would have went into your settings, you would have been able to orientate it correctly because it's hard to move stuff when it's backwards on the screen.
Yeah, yeah.
So did you have a favorite short story, or
Oh, um. Well, I always like the Blue Carbuncle because it's a Christmas story.
yeah, that is, I like that one too.
And
Yeah,
for some reason, Holmes and Christmas seem to go well together, even though they're not much of that in the canon. But it's in pastiches, you can just buy whole books of Holmes and Watson doing stuff at Christmas. So I do like that one, and I just like it's probably the earlier short stories, I guess, the sort of Speckled Band, Red-Headed League, things like that. I think later short stories, you know, the gold is beaten a bit thin by the time you get towards the 1920s. And the novels are fine, but they tend to have huge sections in that are sort of almost novels within the novel. There's sort of story, the story that's led up to the thing that's being detected. is like a separate thing, and it's kind of like, well, I'd probably rather have more Holmes than Watson, if I'm honest. So yeah, probably the earlier short stories, and I like the final problem as well.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that he did come back to life. Spoiler, but I think the final problem itself is a pretty good story, and it just created the idea of the supervillain really well.
Yeah, and talking about the story within a story, like is it the well? There's two of them. There's the study in is it Study in Scarlet, the one that has the American West
Yeah,
story?
that's like the
Yeah,
Mormon city and stuff like that.
yeah. That's an interesting story just in itself, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, I don't not
And
like it. It's just a
yeah,
bit whoa, whoa.
yeah, and
Most of
then
the
you're
book's
jumping to
this.
something else. And then what's the other one about the uh it's a sign of four, I think it is, where you got the mining or whatever, the diamonds in India. So like they're all fascinating things that you can sort of see Doyle working on like his non Sherlock Holmes stuff and trying to
Yeah.
shoehorn it into this because he could have just riffed on those and made some fabulous stories without Sherlock Holmes at all. Like they would have worked really well, I think. um
Yeah, true. Yeah, they could be sort of ideas for novels he had lying around and thought he'd include sort of fold them into the Sherlock Holmes
and but
formula that was so successful.
like for me though, the Hound of the Baskervilles is got to be the pinnacle of the novels for me.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's
that's
got all the
kind of
folklore and everything too.
it's sort of perfectly formed, and it's a great gothic story, and um, yeah, there's so much in that. Yeah, that feels really like a novel that
Yes.
hasn't got that sort of two-part aspect.
And
So
that was had its birth or germination with Dorian Gray, at the Scribner's dinner at the hotel in London, uh,
yeah, that's weird, that isn't it?
and that's why Giles Brandreth, who was uh, I guess he was a conservative politician. I think he was conservative, wasn't he? Yeah, and he's written um, the Oscar Wilde mysteries, and Doyle is a character, Bram Stoker is a character in it, and it's basically Oscar Wilde is Sherlock Holmes
Right,
in many
right,
ways,
right.
and they're really fun. They're really fun. They're really good. I really enjoy them. So if that's something that is because he is he's researched a lot about Oscar Wilde and especially that dinner and everything like that, and Oscar Wilde marrying Bram Stoker's sweetheart. Uh, I think, yeah. So there's that rivalry that's in there as well. All sorts of stuff. So it's fun.
Mm.
Then I guess the other question that I have is visually, movie wise, who do you think? Who's your favorite Sherlock Holmes?
Hmm. Well, there's some really good ones to choose from. I actually think he's been quite well served as a character. Um, I thought uh, what's he called, Murder by Decree with Christopher Plummer. I thought he was really good as a one-off.
Yeah,
Um, I think Jeremy Brett has it in terms of mannerisms and
yeah,
speech and everything else. Not necessarily the look so much, but as a performance and just the way that those shows were put together, I just think that's like the epitome, really. Um, and I just watched one of Gavin's Marple Cinematic Universe videos.
yeah,
He's talking about Joan Hickson being like the sort of summit of Miss Marple representations, and I think Jeremy Brett occupies the same slot for Sherlock Holmes for me.
yeah,
Um, but I like Basil Rathbone. I don't think it's a, the best rendition. He's almost more like Sexton Blake in that he's much more muscular and stuff like
yeah,
that. Um, I don't think it's a faithful rendition, but you got to. I suppose Basil Rathbone, he's like the Margaret Rutherford of Sherlock Holmes. Really, he's sort of it's its own thing.
Yeah.
The Rathbone Holmes is its own character, which is entertaining in its own right. And somebody's written books of those. So there's some World War II set Holmes stories, which are
Yeah.
based on the that version of the character. Because he's become eternal, he's become kind of just like James Bond. It doesn't matter. He can just keep showing up. He can show up in the present. He can be reinvented in all sorts of different ways, and it's always like he has to be there.
Yeah, I really like the well, Jeremy Brett as well, and others. I'll just sort of jump to a few, and then we'll go back to all of them. Like Mark says, Jeremy Brett. Jenny says Cumberbatch, just because he seems to annoy people. But I thought he did a good job as well.
Yeah, no, I liked him.
And Freeman says Basil Rathbone. Yeah, and I do love the Basil Rathbone ones, even though as well Nigel Bruce is great, but not even close to a Watson. But yeah, the Second World War ones are fun for the on
Mm,
their own, and all the however many dozens and dozens of radio ones they did as well, which are real are fun as well. And then the Clive Merrison, later BBC ones that they actually went through the whole canon. Those are fabulous as well on the radio. And then there's even like the 1930s, other 30s Sherlock Holmes movies that I enjoy them all pretty well. There's not many that I don't. Even the silent ones that are kind of interesting as well. And a few of those are more and more are coming to light, not to light so much, but being released and being
right.
restored. And they're just it's just a fabulous story. But also too, like as weird as Sherlock Holmes' Second World War, you got one of the last stories that Doyle wrote, and Sherlock Holmes is the narrator.
Mm,
He's the narrator of the story, which is very, very shocking. Like not shocking, but it shocks you out as you're reading the stories and go, wait a minute, what's this?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
Holmes telling the story. It just doesn't work. Um, it's just it is something. And somebody mentioned here, yeah, Joseph says, I think Sherlock Holmes is among the most popular with so Holmes, yeah, it'd be interesting to see which one wins out after a while. Which one, Tolkien, Shakespeare, or Holmes? Uh, 19th Century Investigations, the 12-volume edition of the Golden Bough. Oh, yeah, I want to read that. That's on my bucket list of things to read. But I need to get a set of it. Mick says he loves the Mormon Strand, in and Scarlet. Um, and Mick is laughing at Jenny's Cumberbatch. Also, cartoon characters as Sherlock Holmes. Cartoon characters. I can't think of. I'm what. Who did cartoon characters for Sherlock Holmes? Oh, there's the mouse. There's the one that's there's a mouse I think that does Sherlock Holmes in a movie that was done.
There's that Basil the Great Mouse Detective.
Something like that, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I assumed that was Sherlock Holmes anyway. But yeah, no. Holmes is I'm sure that was on my list as well to take. So definitely it's popular because again, as you say, you don't need to know. You don't. It doesn't. You don't care if you know um,
Mm.
who did it. It's
No,
that's
no,
not the
that's the
point of
least
reading
of
it.
them, really.
Yeah. Uh, and Mark saying Mickey Mouse and others. Yeah. Okay, doke. Let's move on to number 6 now. I guess we're getting through
Okay,
these fairly quickly.
well, not the Golden Bough, but a kind of opposite of that. So, Folklore, Myths and Legends of Britain, published by the Reader's Digest.
But it's
In
actually a pretty good one, even though like
yeah,
I
it
say
is.
that as if I'm denigrating Reader's Digest, but it's by Ash. Is it Russell Ash or I can't remember now.
Um,
Ash, I think, is the
it's, I think there's a sort of overall editor. Yeah, loads of people contributed different sections. Um,
or is it,
so so basically, Reader's Digest used to produce loads of books in this sort of format, things like a guide to British English villages, or you know, those sort of books, and subscribers would get them, and they'd turn up. It's in a big box with usually extra bits and pieces of little booklets and stuff. And this one, Folklore, Myths and Legends, it's become like a highly prized item. And I found this one for £3 in a charity shop, which was great because our family one's long gone. And they can be. There was a dust jacket originally as well, and this scary guy, you get him on the cover. But I remember reading it, and it really gave me a sense of the kind of the weirdness of the country, because there's this map, various maps showing where there's sort of strange paranormal things or sort of weird legends, and of course some of them were like near where I lived, so it's like
yeah.
I'm in this place now. It's like there's portals to strangeness. So this has sort of got a renaissance amongst the sort of folk horror people of sort of folk horror inclinations. And basically it is like a guidebook, just like all their other
Yeah.
sort of how to drive around the country, that kind of thing. But hugely illustrated, loads of like legends and what have you. Romance of Britain, the Witch Country, and you just get tons and tons of stuff.
Yeah, it's very brief, but there's also references to other things if you want to continue, if I remember right. Uh, yeah,
Yeah. It could send you on a whole kind of I mean, I suppose it's like a sort of 40 and Times kind of thing, really. But in served up in such a tame, family-friendly way, it's just bizarre. I'm not sure if it is Jeffrey Ash. I mean, he was a big sort of
yeah,
Arthurian guy, wasn't he?
yeah. I thought it was an Ash from what I remembered, but uh,
Seems to give all the credits to the Reader's Digest themselves.
oh, okay. So yeah,
Um,
maybe it's not. I thought it was. It's a
some of
long
them
time
seem
since
to be.
I've seen it. I used to have a copy of it, but
Yeah, they seem to be a bit parsimonious with the credits.
huh.
Um, okay, there's a vast lot of tiny print of acknowledgements, um, and organisations and people. But yeah, it's not. I'm sure it's no. It's well known, but not by me, who sort of actually put this together. But I've read that some of these people were like famous eccentrics, and that it's a bit of a raffish crew of contributors, which makes it even better.
It must have some stuff in there by Montague Summers as well. If I think they must have a few bits and pieces written by him. He's the one that's done everything like on werewolves, all sorts of things, and he was actually a consultant I think with on Doyle, or Doyle wrote to him I think about the Hound of the Baskervilles, or one of his
Oh yeah, that's one of them.
relatives or ancestors because they're all connected there.
Yeah, so every bit of the British Isles gets given a cool new name, like this part of Scotland becomes Warlock's country.
Warlocks.
Oh, so brilliant. So I was really glad to find this again in Thirsk.
Uh, Killian says Alan Garner's short stories had the
Oh yeah.
weirdest bibliography heard of. The Red Book of Hengist.
Oh, here we go. Yes, yes. Russell Ash. Russell
Russell Ash.
Ash
Okay. Yeah.
is the main author. Jeffrey Ash is in it as well, and then you get a whole load of other people.
Yeah. So yeah, I knew there was an Ash there somewhere, but
It's
that's my part. Oh, that's Jenny's in the Warlock uh, part of Scotland. So
okay. Good.
uh,
Um,
so yeah, so you got Russell Ash and Jeffrey Ash. I wonder if they're related.
well, one's got an E on the end, so I guess not.
Ah, no. Okay.
But who
Well,
knows?
yeah, you don't want to be uh, associated with my brother who's Jeffrey, so I'll put an E on the end or whatever.
Yeah. So in terms of like as a desert island book, partly it's nostalgia and partly because I can't take like my own country with me, but I could take this, which has got the sort of substrate of the country as in this kind of weird numinous form.
Yeah,
Um,
and when you start hearing something weird noises at night, you can just flip through and go, "Oh, that must be what it is," but I'm not there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Coming all the way from Warlock country. Oh god, and I mean the Reader's Digest did employ loads of illustrators, and there's some great pictures too.
Yeah, I sort
Photographs.
of denigrate them quite a bit because of it's because of their condensed books that I just think are horrid, the abridgments. But those series, and then they did the other series, like I think is the Holmes one you got. That's a Reader's Digest one too, isn't it?
Oh, no, I think they've packed things up in this country. It's Penguin.
Oh, it's
It's the
Penguin.
Penguin
Okay, yeah,
Sherlock Holmes.
okay.
Yes.
But yeah,
Uh,
they've done that kind of stuff. They've taken all the literature ones. Mark has a
yeah,
whole bunch of those.
yeah,
Or did,
yeah.
did. I think they're kind of ugly looking, but the interiors are quite nice because they got a lot of nice illustrations in, like that one. They pack they, the package itself isn't appealing to me, but the insides are. Oh wow, Jenny's saying there's a copy on Amazon for £270.
Mm,
Wow.
it's just become this ridiculous thing. I mean, I suppose it will never be reprinted. It's got this sort of folk horror vibe, and then just people go
Oh,
mad about it.
I used to see those things
It's
by the
still out there. Yeah.
the piles, piles of them. And yeah, they did a huge collection of classics that weren't condensed. Yeah, yeah, that's the ones I was thinking of. But I still, for some reason, in the back of my mind is, oh, it's Reader's Digest because it's the condensed ones. And when you see people on Etsy selling the condensed ones, like you're talking about furniture, like they're saying, "Oh, beautiful book to have on your shelf," and they want like £15 for a condensed, one of the Reader's Digest condensed books, and it's like, oh, if they're selling them for then I should start going out because you can buy them by the dump truck load full, for pennies.
Some people do that. They just get like loads of red spines or green spines or whatever. Um, I think the really old Reader's Digest condensed books, they used to look quite nice. They used to have some quite what now look like quite sort of nice kitsch
Yeah.
retro covers.
Well, it was like there's I was looking at some stuff. The old book club editions, like Companion Book Club. Those didn't have spines so much nice, but beautiful artwork on the
Mm.
front of the dust jacket. And other book club editions from the '50s, just beautiful. Even the spines of those sometimes are just beautiful. And those are like dime a dozen now. And I don't understand because what would you rather have on the shelf if you want something to look nice? Nice artwork or something that's a different color of panels on the spine of the more recent Reader's Digest ones. Yeah. uh yeah, Mark's saying, yeah, the interior designers
Yeah.
love them. Yeah, yeah, I just thought, Don't know why. It's like it's just they're just abominable looking. Like it's like the Heron books. I like even though they did some great titles, great series of stuff. Like you can get a nice, or you used to be able to get a really cheap J.B. Priestley collection, Dennis Wheatley, Russian literature. Like they did all this, like different
Mm.
colors than Agatha Christie, but they're that vinyl plastic, you know,
It's
blue or
heirloom
green or
quality, though.
right.
Heirloom quality, that's what it
Yeah,
is.
but then you walk in. Like I remember going to my Oxfam bookshop, and I'd walk in at times like it was a hot summer day, and I'd walk in and I'd sort of sniff a little bit and I go, oh, they got some Heron books in here. You could smell them a mile away, especially when it gets warm.
Mm.
So, but no, yeah, they, I can't believe 270 pounds for that. Where there was a time, at least when I was going to book sales in Canada, they had a hard time giving those away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeez, who would have thunk it?
Mm.
Somebody who collected them and bought as many as they could find probably are cashing in now if somebody did do that. Yeah, I'll sell it for 220 pounds. Oh yeah, the Ham and Innocent Ham and Innocent Heron books one. Yeah, the Alistair See,
Yeah.
they did great stuff like that. The way they collected the books together, and the J.B. Priestley, and I kept thinking that I it when they used to be really cheap, like you could buy the J.B. Priestley set for like £8 or £10, and I'm going, oh, I don't like the look of them though. And
Mm.
then now when I look at them, they're like £100, and I go, maybe I should have bought them. I could have read them and thrown them away. At least I would have been able to read them.
Mm.
So okay, we still got one or two more.
I've got two more,
Two more.
yes. So time for Conan, the complete chronicles of Conan. So this is Robert E. Howard's sword and sorcery stories, where the hero is Conan the Barbarian, um, as extensively talked about on Michael K. Vaughan's channel. I've talked about in a bit. Um, and there's been lots of other treatments of the character, some movies, loads of comics, um, novels by other hands. But the original stories by Robert E. Howard are really good. This book collects them all. Again, I could read these again and again, and they are escapist, which would be a good thing if you're trapped somewhere on a like a desert island. In fact, there are quite a lot of desert islands and of
Yeah,
various kinds in the stories, so that's good as well.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to have these. I really feel these are the books that are closest to my heart. If I had like a week to live, grim idea, then I'd probably be reading this. So
No,
this is a definite.
I was gonna say facetiously that yeah, like you could read it over and over because they're very forgettable. And I'm uh, one of the few. Well, I guess there are more from what you were saying before we started of comments that I don't really care for the Robert E. Howard's stories so much. They're okay, but I never found them well written. And I'm of the heresy to say that I like the Lynn Carter and Elsbreg de Camp versions actually better because they every time I read a Conan story, I I go through and oh, that's really neat, and then he doesn't do anything with it. And then it's like the Elsbreg de Camp and Lynn Carter. They expanded on those things that were I found interesting. So yeah, so that's where I am with Robert E. Howard, and I know it's very um, sacrilegious to say because he is has become a huge part of booktube especially
Mm,
and
mm,
but and everybody talks bad about the Al Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, as we were saying. But if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't probably be holding that book in your hand.
No, I mean I grew up with the paperbacks. In fact, I might have them. Um, so yeah, Conan stories were republished in the 60s and 70s in a series of paperbacks where you did get these original stories and you got other stories by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter and a couple of others kind of mingled in. And also, and some Robert E. Howard wrote lots of stories about lots of characters. Some of them were like repurposed into Conan stories. And there's people who like hate that. They hate the fact that the purity of these wasn't sort of that wasn't all you got. And I suppose it is unusual to have the pastiches mixed in with the real stories, but to me it's like it's not a hill to die on. And
Yeah.
at the time, when I first read them, I would barely tell them apart. Later, I began to see that with Robert E. Howard writing in the 20s and 30s, pulp magazine author, you get headlong purple prose with a slightly crazy edge and something that is really original. That nobody can recreate that at all. But that other people use the characters and the settings in some pretty cool ways. And I liked that series of paperbacks and the fact they took the stories and stitched them together and made it into one big saga. And to me, if there was a collection of all of those things, obviously it'd be about 3 times the
Mm.
size. I definitely want to take that to a desert island. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would come down to say the Robert E. Howard Conan stories are the best of those stories, but I wouldn't want to be a nuisance about it.
Well, the thing is, I can understand people disliking the fact that taking somebody else's writing and changing it. That I can understand fully. And there's these little bits and pieces that you hear, or in introductions to some books where you got Lynn Carter fiddling with it, and then Elsbrake DeCamp comes and changes it, and then it gets give to another editor, say Lester Del Rey. There's one specific one, and then he changes it again. He doesn't like this, and then he changes it again, and it's like, how many changes down the line, that you're doing from this poor guy's, writing. It's either leave it alone, I guess, is my thing,
Mm,
or
mm,
write something new with the character, rather than maybe doing something else, because I can fully understand people getting up, their hackles up, with feeling they're changing somebody else's writing, because I don't agree with that either. That's why I don't like abridgments so much. It's like somebody
mm,
saying, "Oh, we don't need this in the book," that kind of thing. But yeah, it definitely is contentious, and as you say, there are some that are willing to die on that hill. You know,
yes, I mean I've noticed when I've made videos about this sort of thing, they're the ones that bring out lots of adverse commentary, and I there's lots of things I tolerate, but I hate people telling me that I shouldn't like something. If I like something, I like it, and if I've
yeah,
shared it with you because I like it or even love it, it doesn't work for me for you to sort of show up and say, but you can't like it because of some, you know. I mean, fair enough if they turned out to be like murderers or something, maybe, but it just that really gets my goat. And for some
yeah,
reason, also, I think with Sword and Sorcery, because the original stories are kind of not super politically correct. It brings out a kind of culture
oh yeah,
wars
yeah,
angle as well, with people saying, you know, if somebody's like created a new character or written a character with a female lead or something, then some people get upset about that, and
yeah.
I'm not having that in the comments. It's just not interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's the thing is like that's why I say I would never say that you shouldn't like it because of this. It's like that this is a personal like that I can read and stuff, but they're not a favorite. They're definitely not a favorite of me. And I like the pastiche ones. And but then yeah, there's those ones are saying that you shouldn't read those. They're the same. They're saying that you shouldn't read those because they've been changed. I can understand why you don't like it, but again, to say that you shouldn't like those is another issue right there. I think. Just going
Yeah.
through comments here, going back to the Heron. Mark was saying that you can't find Heron books in the U.S., but I think it's they do very similar. What is it? Centennial? Is it Centennial? Publishers or something like that. I think Centennial's in the title. That they're very similar, and it might actually be the same publishing company, but just their name in the U.S. I'm not sure though. And Jenny says the Conan book is another book to crack
Yeah.
those codes with. And then Mark says he's got that one. He loves it. And Joseph asks, "Do you have a favorite Conan story?"
Um. Yeah. Probably. Let me see. Tower of the Elephant. I'd often say to people, if you're thinking of reading Conan and like, well, am I going to read this or not? If you don't like Tower of the Elephant, you're probably not going to like any of them. But they're very different because the whole thing follows the character through lots of different stages of their life and different kinds of. It's almost like a mashup of different kinds of pulp stories, So there are a lot of pirate stories and stories with sort of armies of knights and things like that. So it's they're sort of they're not actually very samey, although some things do seem to happen quite a lot. You can't wander into the desert without finding a lost city. But then who would want the heroes not to find a lost city?
Yeah,
Be reasonable. Anyway, yes, I don't know. I'm saying Tower of the Elephant as my favourite. It's
I
got a mixture of the sort of violent, roguish adventure with some kind of cosmic horror and some kind of awe-inspiring stuff and building the world and the character. It's loads of fantasy stuff happening in a very short space of pages.
I might be missing or mixing up a couple stories, but there's one that always I remember. But again, I might be mixing these things up, and it might not be very clear because I can't remember the name of it. But he's fighting in caves or something. Like he's been captured, and he's fighting someone who's part snake, like part cobra, possibly. And there's like a snake king or something like that. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, yeah.
And,
There
and
might
that
be a.
one I always remember, but I don't remember the
I
name of it.
think it happens twice because in the novel, some things seem to happen in a very similar way to things that have happened in some stories before, where, like you say, he's captured and he's wandering. He has to sort of escape through tunnels and things like that. Um, uh, I think it's the Scarlet Citadel has the snake. Um, I can't disappear to find books
No,
and
no, it's
but
just it's one that I like. Even though, as I say, they're not a favorite of mine, but it's something that is all that story. Or as I say, I might have conflated a few, but that one has always stayed in my mind, always for some reason.
if folks out there, if you Google Conan the Usurper and see the cover of the book that's called Conan the Usurper, you will see Conan and a snake, and you will see something that you might think Sigmund Freud might have something to say about it.
No doubt, no doubt. I have that same edition on my Kindle. Probably get to it after I finally finish the Tarzan collection.
Ooh.
Prefer Conan in the comics, Mark says.
Yeah.
And Jenny prefers the movies. I've only seen the one. Like I remember going to see the Conan the Barbarian with Arnold when it came out, and I remember loving it. I remember loving it, but I
Mm.
guess there were other movies made which completely passed me by. I don't know of any others. They've redone
Only
them.
really two, and a sort of spin-off,
Oh, okay.
um, and only one more with Arnie. I mean, personally, I like the Conan the Barbarian movie. Uh, Conan the Destroyer came after that, and I was really
Oh,
disappointed with that. And then there's a
yeah,
fairly
I
recent
remember the
one with
title.
Jason Momoa. Disappointed with that as well.
Well, it's like the uh, John Carter movie that they mentioning Edgar Rice Burroughs, and this is Sword, not sorcerer, but sword. So there's a connection. And it's like the film was good on its own, but yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't work. Like it just, and then apparently there's a second one, and yeah, they keep trying these things, and somehow they don't catch for some reason in the visual realm
No.
and the cinematic realm for some reason for a few of these.
I think things that have been copied already, it's like, what's the point? I know it's like that was they're the originals, but
Yeah.
people have seen all that stuff before.
Joseph said, prefer Howard's original versions from the 30s. Yeah, that'll be what those are, I guess. And what wasn't it Del Rey Books that actually started putting them out? I think in the U.S. first of all as the original stories from the magazines, and then this yours is the
Yeah,
Golan's version.
these are also original stories without amendments from Weird Tales. The Del Rey ones is there's like three of those, so they unpack things a bit more, and you get stuff like fragments and other stuff,
Huh.
sort of more tangential stuff as well, and illustration. So those would be the ones to have. But there's three of those, and it's Desert Island Books, so I've gone for the
Yeah.
one volumer.
Uh, Mark saying Lynn Carter was a terrible writer, but an interesting editor. Yeah.
True.
DeCamp Carter is fan fiction.
I think they
Yeah,
would be now. Well,
yeah.
certainly Lynn Carter. I think a lot of his stuff be hard to see it as being other than fairly good fan fiction. Not
And
sure
Summer
though.
says, I agree, Roy. I like what I like. And Dave says, yeah, everyone has a right to be wrong, even Sean. Well, that's why, like I prefaced the Heinlein video yesterday, I reserve the right to change my mind, and I also reserve the right to be wrong occasionally, and that I might say something wrong. So I reserve that right.
Yeah,
Fan
we're
edit.
not submitting doctorate theses here,
No,
are we?
and the thing is too, it's like all this stuff too is like you're reading this, and something else. You like the Conan ones, and somebody else may find a whole bunch of other manuscripts coming out and stuff. Then you start reading that, and you might change your mind on some of the stories, like whether good or bad. You might say, "Oh wow, he had something better in the manuscript, but he took that out and he put it in here. Why did he do that?" And it's a journey. It's you're exploring and you're learning
Mm,
as you're
mm,
going along. So, and this is the problem with a lot of things, because you put it up on the video or you put it in writing, and people seem to think that that's how it's going to be all the time. And it's like, well, no, you reserve the right to change your mind, or to
sure,
learn
yeah,
something new.
yeah.
Because I might all of a sudden pick up Conan again and start reading some stories, and they'll just all of a sudden hit, and then I'll go back and reread everything and love them. And that's happened before on many occasions. So,
Mm.
favorite story, the flame knife.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah, I don't know that one. Oh yeah, yeah. No, I agree with that. Yeah, leave Carter alone. Thongar forever. Yeah, the Thongar are fabulous. They're absolutely horrible, but they're fabulous.
It's a perfectly entertaining couple of hours reading a Lynn Carter book, particularly a Thongor book.
And it's like another one I've got. Oh, it's a trilogy. Oh, I forget the name of it now, but I showed it on the one thing. It's a Tarzan pastiche where uh, the baby, like the Tarzan character, was abducted by cat people from another planet. Balzan, that's what it's called, Balzan. And I've got to read these because they sound so horrid, but you
Yeah.
know, it's like I kind of wonder, Tarzan does his, yell, his ape yell. So what's the cat yell? A meow? It's like I got to read
Oh
this
my
at
god.
some point to find out.
Oh dear.
And Thongor is great because I think it's Thongor is set in Australia, I think, isn't it? Yeah, Thongor is Australia, I think. Um, I think it's he's
Yeah, it's Lemuria, isn't it? There's another
yeah,
series he has in set in Gondwana land that originally,
yeah,
like, when it's like all the continents to jammed together.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Lemuria, yeah, Lemuria, yeah. But there is it no? Well, there is another one that it is Australian. Somebody else has done not a Tarzan pastiche, and I'm sure it's Australia. And I can't think of what that one is. I must have got it mixed up with Thongor.
yeah, it does ring a
Something
bell.
anyway. I think, or I might be again. Again, I reserve the right to be wrong, and I reserve the right to forget things, and I reserve the right
Mm.
to change my mind. So don't listen to anything I'm saying. So one more, one more.
Yeah, well, I think it has to be number 49 in the Sweet Valley High series. No, not that. It has to be Ulysses by James Joyce. So, again, I suppose here I'm finding something that I have read and enjoyed with reservations and still find endlessly fascinating, and I'd be delighted to have a few more passes through it. I'd rather do it with a couple of other reference books as well, but you know, you can't. So I would take Ulysses, and the hero of this, Leopold Bloom, is one of those characters in the family tree of Tarzan Alive. Uh, just mention that as a thing. So yeah, read this. It was kind of a booktube thing with a bunch of other people. The Ulysses Six. There was Greg, another bibliophile reads, a bunch of others. And we did some live chats about it. But I like it, and again, it's like a whole world. You know, I mean, yes, it's Dublin, and it's a day in Dublin, but it's
Yeah.
kind of got that immersion of stuff. And
Well, being on a desert island, you could write your own, guide to it after you've reread it so many times. And
it would be great, wouldn't it? It's like, I've just figured out the real solution. I've got this devastating critique of this modernist classic that's baffled scholars for centuries, for decades, and I'm stuck on a desert island.
yeah, yeah, it's I read it a long time ago, and we already mentioned you're doing Finnegan's Wake, or at least part of it. And I read those sort of back to back, and it was like that's the way to madness. It's like it's and I am convinced. Like I was in my early 20s, so it was like there was no chance that I was going to catch even a tenth of what's in there. And I've got that great big, is it Cambridge University Press annotated version of Ulysses, which I want to go through, and and
Yeah, it's a
you
nice
you
book,
you
that.
yeah, and I think that's how I'm going to approach it, and I'd like to approach Finnegan's Wake at some point again. I think I would try. Um, and you were mentioning something. I'm not sure if it was here or now or in your video. You mentioned you made a connection with science fiction as well with Finnegan's Wake, and I did with the Philip was a farmer. But
Mm.
there's also Dahlgren by Samuel R. Delaney,
Oh yeah,
which I love, and I've read it twice now, and I definitely want to read it again. And it's a difficult book as well. And it's like,
yeah.
how is it? How? Yeah, the first sentence is the end of a sentence, and then the last sentence in the book is the beginning of that sentence.
Oh, another one of them. Right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's kind of Ulysses like, and Finnegan's Wake like, in the sense of you're not sure what's going around. It folds in on itself. You've got text side by side that are different texts, but like the text here on the page has no reference to the text here. But then you turn a couple pages later, and then that text previously has something to do with this text, and it's just all interwoven, and it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to have another go at that. I didn't make any headway with it.
Dahlgren?
Dahlgren, no, no.
No.
I've read other Delaney. I read his Navarian series, four books that he defined as sword and sorcery. Um, and the earlier ones would be pretty satisfying to a sword and sorcery reader, as well as having lots of interesting ideas in them. And then he kind of blows it up and has all this stuff about AIDS in New York bleeding through from kind of real life, which is good too. But it's kind of like, wow, this is, it becomes pretty challenging stuff as well. But he's a really interesting writer.
Well, it's something that maybe it's a future project for us to do with Dahlgren, is after you've done the Finnegan's Wake, and then we read the Dahlgren, and you can sort of compare and see what stuff that he's done that is Joycean esque,
Yeah, yeah.
or something like that. That could be interesting.
Or I could just read all these Sweet Valley High books.
Oh my God, you have all those. Oh, gee. Yeah. That's like I said. Reading Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake is back to back, is like a way to madness. I think that's a guaranteed way to madness.
Yeah, for different reasons, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Samuel
Uh,
Delaney wrote some Wonder Woman comics once.
oh, did he?
Yeah, yeah, they're pretty. There was a period when Wonder Woman, she'd renounced her superhero powers and like goddesshood, and was more like a sort of martial arts spy type of character, a bit like Emma
Oh,
Peel in the Avengers, um, in a sort of attempt to be hip by DC, and then there's a kind of feminism angle, and Delaney wrote some of this stuff. You get these great wordy panels, which is great.
oh, I didn't know that. I'd be interested to look at those.
Mm.
Let's go with some comments here. Alex is here. And Kelaine saying sweet. I think he's referring to the Ulysses. And Mark saying he's still struggling with Joyce. And then Wombar the Wombats. That's yeah. That's that's a uh, that could be interesting. Ulysses is a big one. How many pages? What is it? It's only 900 pages. It's less than 1,000, I think,
Yeah,
isn't it?
once you get going, it's not. I just want enough books to make a raft out of, really. But
Yeah.
657.
Oh yeah. So it's not even that.
That
It's short.
Cambridge book is huge, though.
Oh, it is. Yeah, I
I
should
have
have
got
grabbed it.
that. No, that, but it's just for ease of carrying. I didn't bring that one over to
Yeah,
this part of the room.
I should have brought it over to, because it's just in behind me here. But um, oh yeah. Well, I sort of cheated. I don't know if you saw my Desert Island books for my things, because Les Miserables was one of my books. So
Mm.
it's one book, but I chose five different translations. Still one book.
Mm.
Still one book. So is are
Fair enough. Yeah.
annotated different annotated versions the same
Ah,
book?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh well, if you're allowed multiple editions,
Oh
then it's
well. Okay, I'm not setting a precedent here, so I'm deleting this part from the thing because all of a sudden everybody will be bringing a truckload of annotated Draculas or something like that, which there is a truckload of annotated Draculas. Mark said he's doing Bloomsbury. I guess is it Bloom Day? Is it called Bloom's Day or
yeah, yeah,
yeah
yeah. I think
events?
so.
My library again this year planning now. Is there an SFNF stream of consciousness? Phil K. Dick. Yeah, and I think oh what's the British writer that's Michael Moorcock was promoting too, like the drug induced stuff. Like what's I can't think of his name. I wanted to say Burgess, but it's not Burgess.
Not Brian Aldiss,
No, at same time,
not Ballard.
J.G. Ballard. Yeah, I think
Mm,
yeah, J.G.
yeah.
Ballard could be sort of stream of consciousness at times. I think I haven't read too much, but Philip K. Dick. But in some ways, Dahlgren is a bit stream of
Mm,
consciousness
mm.
to a certain extent. Dave is saying they need to publish an omnibus of Tarzan Alive, Doc Savage. Yeah, that would be kind of cool. Yeah, because like I say, I picked this up and I do want to get the Doc Savage one because it's, oh, well, it's Phil Jose Farmer to begin with, but that would be, um, so that would be a good one.
Yeah,
Well,
there's an edition now of the Doc Savage one with a bunch of extra essays and bits and pieces that's really nice.
that would be cool. Yeah, Tarzan Edgar or Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Hmm.
uh, Oughs, but the the Hobbit of Mars.
It has to happen.
Well, Tarzan. I mean, Philip Jose Farmer wrote Jesus. Is it Jesus of Mars or Jesus on
Yeah, I've
Mars or
not read
something
that.
like that? Oh, Jesus, Tarzan at Sweet Valley High.
Mm. Yeah, I'm not sure I've got that one.
And yeah, and Jenny says, yeah, wouldn't Encino Man be the '90s similar to Tarzan at Sweet Valley? Would love to read Tarzan. They're fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, oh, did Delaney write an issue where Wonder Woman meets Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser? I don't know. I
That's the
didn't
sort
even
of
know he
thing I'd
did.
expect you to know, Dave.
Yeah, I didn't even know he did the Wonder Woman uh, comics. So that would be kind of cool. And I've got to read all the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser as everybody is aware that I'm not a huge fantasy fan in general, and I think that's why I've always put off reading Tolkien and all these. But a huge science fiction fan, and people find that contradiction because they think I should like both. But
Mm,
uh, I
yeah,
I
different animals.
I try to occasionally add some fantasy stuff, and maybe that's the other thing with Conan the Barbarian, that it's more on the fantasy side that doesn't quite work for me. But then John Carter, the Barsoom books work, and it's basically Conan on Mars in some ways. He's using a sword, but it's more science fiction. I don't know.
Yeah, you
Or I
don't
think
have
of it that way.
magic and sorcerers and stuff, do you? It's the
Yeah,
sword and planet. I'd say the Fritz Liebers, they're very much their own thing. I mean, they're in a
yeah.
different tradition that's more sort of James Branch Cabell and people like that, really.
Yeah, but
Ironic.
they're still fantasy, sort of,
Oh
not the
yeah, yeah.
thing.
You got to
Yeah, yeah,
accept some
yeah,
funny names and imaginary
yeah.
lands. Yeah.
And Gareth says he loves Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. Been reading them tonight, third time. Yeah, I do have to. I have to pick those up and read them. And I've not read any of the Elric books. I'm Moorcock is someone that has escaped me in many ways. Like I have not read hardly anything of his, and what I have read in the past, I haven't liked. So, but again, it's somebody that in the history of science fiction, you can't exclude him, and
Mm,
because he's so important, and I don't
sure.
mean for the Elric books, I mean about New Worlds and the New Wave. You can't
Mm,
escape him.
mm, mm.
Yeah, Elric books are great too. They did a Fafford Grey Mouser crossover to promote the adaptations that DC put out, and it was during her Emma Peel period.
Oh, right.
So, what was Wonder Woman basically Emma Peel? Like, did they do a crossover with her with Emma
No, it
Peel?
wasn't. It wasn't. No, it was like she was that type of character. You know, it was
Uh,
like international mystery. She wore a sort of white jumpsuit, I think, with flares, and she wasn't. She didn't have the. I don't think she had the magic lasso and all of that sort of stuff. So she was like a human adventurer for a while,
uh,
and then she was restored to the Wonder Woman we know and love.
Mark has to run, so
Cheers.
thanks. Thanks for showing up, Mark. And Kalen asks, do some authors inoculate you to other authors? Does Howard inoculate you against Fritz Lieber? Well, I suppose if you like one thing, and then if there's aspects of that in another author, you might be more um, disposed for it. Maybe you might be more interested in reading it.
Yeah, I guess that depends on the reader, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Because if you're the type of person who thinks, right, I read something in that genre and loved it. I got another thing hoping it would be like that, and it wasn't like that at all.
and then you
So I
stop
know
reading. Yeah,
I hate that. I just want this or things that are exactly like this. So if you only wanted, say, barbarian adventurers like Conan, you could find a lot of them, but you would not be enjoying the Fritz Lieber books because
no,
they've got sort of layers of irony and wit, and they work in a completely different way. And anti-heroism is, they're different.
yeah. So I think it works both ways. Yeah, and as you say, I think it's more for the reader. Uh, but if you and and I guess from thinking of me, why I gravitated more, I guess, for science fiction than fantasy was because like there is a crossover. There's a clear blurring of edges of this in certain ones, but there are other ones that are different. They're different beasts. They're different things.
Mm,
And when I see the science fiction, which I liked, so I pick up something else that's science fiction, and I probably like that, and then I pick up something that's pure fantasy. It's very different.
mm,
So yeah, and it just didn't work for me at the time. But occasionally you get writers like Fritz Lieber, even Clifford Simak, that blend some fantasy with science fiction, and a
yeah.
lot of those that I
Jack
like.
Vance would be another one.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
Mm,
and I enjoy those.
mm,
You know,
mm, mm.
um, so it's a it's kind of a strange thing, but you can't then go from that to Tolkien.
Mm,
You it's
mm,
it,
mm,
they're again a different beast.
mm,
You know,
sure.
so it's really hard to define, and I don't quite know why I prefer science fiction over fantasy. Like I can't fully articulate it. I could say, oh well, the science fiction seems more realistic or probable. Well, is it?
Mm,
Is it really? Like some of the science fiction that I read, the super science stuff, that's just as magic as magic, but then I love reading stuff like oh, what's the Ghost Finder guy.
Thomas
Uh,
Karnacki.
yeah, I love those stories. They're supernatural, and I love
Yeah,
those,
yeah.
and I love ghost stories. That's fantasy in a sense. That's a
Mm,
broad thing of fantasy. So why don't I like other ones? I haven't answered that question yet,
mm.
and I don't think I ever will. But okay, well we've gone
That's
through the
books.
books. Now we're
Yeah.
on to music.
This is like one thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I found this quite difficult because I've kind of gone off music, um, which is weird, but it's almost like I've developed like an allergy or something. Um, I don't know why it is, because a few years ago, not many years ago, like just before the pandemic, I was really quite immersed in music, and what I mainly did, this is pre booktube days, um, I was writing for like a music blog. So I'd be reviewing gigs, I'd be reviewing records, I'd be editing other people's contributions, I'd be writing articles about music and stuff like that. Um, and that music blog, nothing to do with me personally, but that music blog closed for very unfortunate reasons. And the scars of that meant I just, overnight, I just thought, I'm only talking about what you might call pop music now. I went from loving it and being fascinated by it and having like developed quite a lot of lore about it and being able to write about it to thinking it's just a sexualized beat with a bit of emotional melody on the top. What's so clever? What's so good about that? So I sort of got to this point of like, I hate all music. Music must die, which I've never quite got out of really. Now and again, I'll find like one song I quite like and play that to death for a while, but I've kind of just lost it's almost like I'm not losing a limb or something. But for this, I did think, well, yeah, it would be good to have some tunes. Um, so the album I've chosen is it's I think a double album. So I'm taking a tip from your book there of finding a way to stretch the definitions. But I've got Ramones, It's Alive by the Ramones. So this was a live album that was recorded in 1977, I think, when the Ramones did some live shows in London, spread over a couple of nights, and it was their absolute peak period, and it was a really exciting time when punk was pretty new and they'd really sort of come into their own. And I just thought, well, I do like this, and if I'm on this desert island, it'd be great now and again to just get an infusion of pure adrenaline. Plus, as a kind of life stage thing, the whole punk rock thing, that's like my era really. When I was sort of 15 or 16, I assumed I would become like a hippie, that I'd be listening to prog rock and these sort of super transcendental, complicated epics of music, and kind of the music versions of the science fantasy books I like reading. I thought that would be it, and then all of that was just destroyed really with punk, and that's when I sort of started going to see live bands and stuff like that. So that's like part of my identity is the whole punk rock thing. And that's why I just throw my videos together in a DIY kind of way, because I've still rightly or wrongly, I've still got sort of punk rock ethos. So yeah, Ramones, It's Alive. Loads of songs, like 2 minutes long, 3 minutes long. Um, know it backwards, know every little bit of between song talking and stuff like that, and it's just a lovely, lovely thing. But unusually, it's like, yeah, I'd take that. That's the only one I can think of because I
Oh,
hate music. And I'm too old to sort of, well, start again, learn to like jazz or classical. Just have not got the brain for it. If anybody can figure out how to heal me of my music phobia, that would be good. because it's a whole aspect of life that's kind of been burned out.
Just listen to Teenage
This is
Lobotomy
my
over and
therapy
over.
session, isn't it?
Yeah. So just listen to Teenage Lobotomy over and over again, and you'll get a lobotomy maybe. It's a great song. Though.
It's
It's a great song.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm sure that's on that album,
It
isn't it? I
is.
think.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
They're
that
great.
era, so I think they'd done about two albums, Rocket to Russia and their first one, and there's maybe a couple of other odd bits, but yeah, it is like the classic period.
Yeah, I used to have that on vinyl. I used to have that on vinyl, and
Mm.
it's a great album. And I never knew where they got. I assumed they got the title from, Frankenstein. It's alive! It's alive! I
Yeah,
assume
yeah,
they must have
yeah.
got it from that, but maybe not. It's
No, but the cover artwork's weird because it's set in like a sort of really polite little font, hasn't got an exclamation mark or anything. It's
yeah.
just sort of weird. It looks like a font you'd use to advertise like Victorian tea time and with crumpets and doilies.
I always found like when you do your shorts or I think your Instagram posts when you use music, you always find some interesting titles for it though. And you're saying you don't like music, but you always find some interesting, usually 70s, but sometimes 60s. Offbeat, I guess you would say, or I don't know if offbeat is the correct word, but not mainstream
Mm, mm.
music. And so I assumed you were a big fan of music, or
Yes,
still
yeah,
am.
I was till it dropped off.
Was it only pop music that you liked? I won't say what you like now because
No,
obviously, but
I like all sorts of things. I mean, actually, I've exaggerated somewhat for comic effect. Another choice, if I had a second choice, it would be Keith Jarrett, the Köln concert, because I thought that's something I could listen to again and again and again. I just thought it would probably be too emotional. If I was on my own, I'd probably rather listen to something that's basically stupid, like the Ramones, that's just going to give you energy, rather than something that's going to give you like the sort of surface all those emotions the way lots of music can. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just trying to. Maybe it's not so much like I don't want music as I don't want emotion because I am a robot.
what about classical music? Would that you think could you listen
It's
to that in the background or?
yeah, and I like to hear it, and like it works well. When it's in like when it's part of something else, like part of a movie or something, that can be brilliant. Um, but I never find myself sitting down and thinking, let's put on a symphony or let's listen to Classics FM.
Go
I've thought
go
about it. I've
try
thought about doing one of those like listen to one thing a day for a year type of projects, but I've got enough things like that going on with BookTube.
try some 20s. Try some, roaring 20s music. That might snap you out of it
Yeah,
if you haven't tried it. That's I find that stuff great
that's a good idea. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean
because
that's
it's
something I
fun.
used to fight to sort of finding something you don't know very much about, like I don't know Northern Soul or something, and like really going into it and listening to tons of it and finding stuff you really like, and that used to be really great.
Yeah, because I don't I've started I haven't fallen in love with music, but I don't listen to it as much as I used to. And I think that happens to a lot of people. But then occasionally I will take a couple days and start listening to a bunch of music again. And but 20s and 30s and even pre 20s and 30s music I really liked. And there was one time that I remember going into an antique store and this guy had a 78 player and I was with a friend who wanted to buy the 78 player. And so he was putting on some 78 records. And every time, I'm young in comparison to, definitely I wasn't around in the 20s. but I knew every song and every stinger that he put on. And this guy, it just freaked him out because he couldn't believe that I knew this stuff, you know. And he was trying to hide the label and put it on and then see if I know, you know, because I love that stuff.
Oh,
Uh,
excellent.
but yeah, no, try 20s. Let's go back here to uh, back here. Oh, we're quite. There's quite a few ones that I've missed here. Uh, yeah, it was Mark that left, and Alex saying, "Would you say Simak has a human feel to his writing?" Yeah, I would say that a bit of science to spark the sentences, but not too heavy. Yeah, it's like he wasn't a hard science fiction writer for sure. Dave is saying he prefers weird fiction, and that's a huge umbrella. And yeah, that covers a lot of stuff that's really fabulous stuff. Like you, I think Roy, you collect the British Library weird fiction collection.
Yeah,
Those,
the Tales of the Weird books. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and I've got a few of those, and I'd love to have them all because every time I look at a list of them, I go, "Oh, this is some really interesting stuff."
Mm, mm.
Simak has excellent descriptions of characters like Enoch Wallach from um, Way Station. And Jim, damn, sorry I missed this, Roy. I'll watch it on the rewatch. Yeah, it'll be there shortly. Punk DIY. Great album, 38 songs in 50 something minutes. Oh, 38 songs, yeah. It is a great album. Jenny saying, hello, Jim. Music isn't like Wives or Dragons of Pern. Once you're impressed, you can't change genres, is it?
Mm,
I,
I think you can. I mean, it
yeah,
used to be like that. It used to be like, well, if you know, that's been superseded by this new stuff. But
yeah.
I don't think it works like that anymore.
Alex says he loves the undertones from the punk era. Jim saying, hi there, Jenny. MJ's here. Hello.
Oh, MJ.
This is why most of my music choices are instrumental. Oh, okay. Jenny saying, hey, MJ, how are you feeling? Alex says, I say music is there to play and enjoy. Hey, Jenny, feeling better? Hearing is still down, I guess, thumbs
Oh.
down. Is there anything that can help, or is it just cause of weight? I think he's referring to MJ. Rocket to Russia rocks. Spring Four Seasons, nice and light.
Good point.
Vivaldi.
Yeah.
Music is a part of my life as books. My taste is crazy wide. Yeah, so is mine. It's like, but I don't know. I get out of it at times. Like I was saying, like I love folk stuff too. Like I like
Hmm.
I keep forgetting his name lately. The guy who went around and did the field recordings, you know, of yeah, all over the world, and I love
Oh
that
yeah.
stuff.
Alan something is it?
Alan
Alan
Lomax,
Lomax.
yeah.
Hmm.
Uh, Cone concert by Keith Jarrett is amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah. I could send you links on Voxeroy to see if you could bring back the music spark.
Do it. Do it.
But try some 20s. That's all I say. Try some 20s and see what you think. Um, Heartbreaking hearing that
You mean the
you've lost the
1920s,
music
don't you?
mojo. Music does what other art forms can do. It's inexplicable.
Yeah.
Jenny, natural healing, just have to wait it out.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah, no,
Hmm.
that's as I say, I'm a bit surprised. I'm a bit speechless to say because all your videos when you choose when you chose the music, I guess it's just from memory, and they just work, and I just love the music that you chose for those.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I still have the sort of knowledge of it. It's just not the engagement with it, I suppose. I don't want to make too big a thing of it, but
yeah, yeah,
it is. It does strike me as weird that I've sort of went from like sort of being massively into it and involved with it to like, I can live without this stuff. What the hell?
Okay, well, let's go to your luxury item. And again, this is never I never know what the luxury item is. So, you know,
Um, yeah, so I've thought about this, and I think for me it would be a proper bed with like a mattress and sheets and stuff like that. Because I just think if I could somehow make a sort of civilized base, at least for sleeping, that's comfortable and a bit of a refuge, then I could deal with all the other stuff. So if that's allowable, because it begs the question of like, well, how are you going to wash the sheets and stuff? But assuming there's some sort of way for that to happen, I would, if it's allowable, I would have a bed. In fact, I would say a luxurious bed.
well, why not? Yeah, because I think I think it was Brandy, the book collector brought an easy chair to read in,
Oh,
a nice
nice.
chair. So I thought that was a good one. So yeah, I don't remember what my luxury. Oh, I think my luxury item was sort of pencils and paper or something like that, an
Oh, yeah,
unlimited supply
nice.
of paper or something like that. I think because when I go through all my translations of Les Miserables, I was going to write down all the differences in minute detail.
Mm. Yeah,
So
that would
yeah,
be
so
good.
why not a bed? That is an important thing because I could never. I used to go camping, and sleep on like stone and have no problem. God Almighty, I'd be dead. Trying to do that now. Um, so just let's go back to a few things here. Jenny saying, "Have all love and hugs, MJ." David's fantastic music stories. Well, that we're gonna have to see on his desert island books.
Mm.
Thank you. MJ is saying to Jenny, and Gareth saying big hugs, MJ. Also, Roy, possibly something that might bring back your love of music is seeing and hearing it live. Nothing like live music.
Mm. Mm.
He's always a promoter. He's promoting his own live music. No, but it is true. There is a difference. Obviously, it's like watching film. When you see it on the screen and on the small screen, there is a difference. You reach saturation point by the sounds of it. A bed, that's great. And I'll steal a bed and chair for my tent. If you got a comfy bed, you'd quickly discover whether you were any, if there were any cats on the island. It'll be Balzan. You'll hear a Balzan meowing at nighttime through the trees.
With the cat cry, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, that bed is a good one. That bed is a good one. That's like yeah, because now compared to what I made it before, it would either be a bed, uh, a chair, or a wheelchair. Maybe I'm not sure which. A comfy wheelchair.
Yeah,
Uh,
kind of a
yeah,
lazy boy chair would be the best of both worlds, really.
yeah, you could sleep in it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and I guess it is a luxury item was a guitar, but a bed is much more practical. Guitars only go with rocking chairs. That's a banjo. Actually, it's a banjo goes better with a rocking chair. And you need a shaved head for that, and don't speak. So okay, well there's another desert island books done. I was just going to say desert island books. Those people that stole my idea, you know.
Oh, oh.
So thanks, Roy, and thanks for
So for
everybody
anyone just
stopping
coming
by.
in at the end, I had 8 Sweet Valley High books. That was my choices.
Yeah,
It was the most boring program ever.
and I just sat here.
I'm posting them to you next.
Oh God, please no,
Well,
please
it's
no.
been real, guys.
It's been fun. Again,
Hmm.
thanks everybody. Next week, if everything goes well, will be Pat at Book Chat with Pat.
Oh, nice.
And then after that, the week after that, hopefully, is Jim at Murder, Mystery Murder and Mayhem. I think that's the name of his channel. It's still to be determined or announced for the 20th and then the last Sunday of April, because 20th is Easter. So I don't know whether I might just take that day off, unless I can find somebody to do it, and then hopefully, and again, I want to have not just booktubers do this. I want commentators to do this as well. People commentate, and they don't have to be on camera. Like you can just put the camera on the table and slide the books in, and then we have the discussion that way. That'll work. So
Yeah, that would be awesome.
yeah,
Because there's
and
loads of commenters where you just you have as much interaction with them as other booktubers,
yeah,
but the only difference is camera, really.
yeah. Let's see. Jenny is saying the same thing. I think on my banjo thing. Another great episode. Thank you, Joseph. Great episode, Roy, and it's been awesome to see Roy do a live. Probably the last one that he'll ever want to do now after doing it with me.
No, that was good. I've got the technology better. I used to not like doing them because I was always like nervous about the technology, but it sort of seems to be quite stable at the moment. So.
Yeah, it's worked out well. Sweet Valley High? Question mark. Uh, yeah, it's saying thanks, and my lecture items, beer. Cheers. My choices were still the dumbest.
Days.
No, they weren't. They weren't. Well, you had one of the populous ones, Lord of the Rings, and I was saying hi, Jenny. So yeah, so we'll end it there, and we'll see you next week. Thanks everybody for stop. Oh, there's actually a lot more here. Oh, like all of a sudden they popped up a whole bunch of things here. Okay. Alex saying, hey Jenny, hey Alex. You stole my 8 choices, Roy. Sweet Valley High. Sweet Valley High is amazing. I'm happy to catch this show. Thanks for stopping by, MJ. Bye, everybody.